Hello, everybody. Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. We're now going to convene a work session of the Anchorage Assembly. Today is the 4th of April. It's 1:03 p.m. We're scheduled to 2 o'clock. We're here to discuss AR 2025-40, resolution of the municipality of Anchorage appropriating additional pledged tourism room tax in amount not to exceed $1,222,742 within the 2024 Convention Center Room Tax Fund to provide for payment to Visit Anchorage for the additional pledged tourism room tax under professional services contract with Visit Anchorage, news agreement for civic ventures in the office of the municipal manager. We'll start with introductions. Mr. Martinez.
George Martinez.
Randy Salt.
Mark Littlefield.
Karen Bronga.
Felix Rivera.
Anna Brawley.
Cameron Perez Video.
Christopher Constant.
Exalto.
On the phone, we have Mr. Myers.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Is there anyone else on the phone from the assembly? So I don't see anyone or hear anyone else. And so with that, then we're here also hosting Visit Anchorage to provide for us details of a report that we asked for them to provide to us, which is essentially a contract last year report before we move into conversations between the municipality and Visit Anchorage and other parties for the potential future use of the bed tax funds that are currently under this user agreement and this contract. And so we have invited the folks from Visit Anchorage to present their report. And so we'll start with that. Sabi, you have the floor. Welcome.
Green, thank you. Yeah.
Turn it off when you're done.
Great. Thank you, and appreciate the great attendance here today. I'd like to quickly just let you know who's at the table with me, and then we have several board members and some staff in the audience with us today too. Julie Sapi, CEO of Visit Anchorage. Next to me is Jack Bonney, who is our VP of Communications. Next to Jack is Angela Johnstone, who is our controller, who prepared those giant worksheets for you. And then next to her is David Kasser, who is our Senior Vice President of Sales. I do have just a couple, like 2 pages worth of opening comments I'd like to share, and then we're happy to take questions and see where the discussion goes today. So first off, thank you for setting this work session. It's good to see you in person. Last time we had requested a work session from Visit Anchorage, and it was one of our few snow days this year, and we ended up doing it virtually. So it's great to be here in person. To start, I'll just say that we are proud of the partnership that we have had with the municipality. It's a 50-year relationship this year. And I think it's been very fruitful for our city by supporting both the promotions reinvestment, supporting 2 convention centers, and by contributing to the general fund. Before moving into some of the big picture discussion, I'd like to provide some context regarding the written comments about lagging payments in our written report to you. I just want to be clear that we have a very solid and positive working relationship with our municipal contract administrator and the staff here within the municipality. We recognize the staffing shortages experienced over the last few years, particularly in finance, and made choices to accommodate these challenges while protecting our cash flow. And we are fortunate to be able to do that. However, we also do look forward to getting back to a more timely schedule and a fully staffed municipality. But broadening the scope a little bit, I want to get a few things out in front of this meeting. First, I do expect that 2025, the budget before you, will be the biggest year for tourism marketing and promotions, at least in the foreseeable future, with more budgets expected in 2026 and beyond. The reason for this, if you look at the bottom line, you will see that we have carryover in 2025 that we are spending down. And that is part of the reason why our budget is larger than it has been in recent years and larger than I think it will be in the coming several years. So we're expecting probably to have a budget $5 to $6 million lower next year, which is also part of the reason why you haven't seen us staffing up, because we don't expect this level. So our staff has been very busy. More budget means more work, which is great. But we also have been very, very busy with what I would consider a minimal staff for the level of program that we're doing. Second, the item before you, the AR 2025-40 is part of our approved budget. I know one of the questions is, how are you spending this money specifically? It is part of our 2025 budget and mixed in with all of the bed tax revenues. Perhaps most important for you, we do know, and we've had many conversations, that there's an ever expanding set of needs in our community. Tourism already creates some of the funding and resources needed by the municipality, but we are eager to work with you to level up this commitment, in essence, to do more. We know that there are plenty of community conversations already going on in parallel to this one. The funds already generated through visitor activities like staying in hotels, renting cars, plus property taxes generated by the industry contribute about $50 million in the general fund this year alone. So it already is part of the answer. But again, the needs are big. There are maintenance needs for some landmark municipal-owned properties, and there's also needs to fund everyday civic services and other infrastructure. We've heard those conversations, and we know that there may be some ways to access funds in the convention center reserve waterfall earlier than anticipated, and I think some of those conversations have started separately. And they may be accessible possibly very soon, rather than waiting for the full life of the bonds. So we've been asking questions and planting some seeds to further explore this possibility. I will tell you, I don't have a complete picture yet, but possibly soon, and maybe some of you have a more complete picture than I do at this point. But as a concept, know that Visit Anchorage's board of directors are ready to help expand the benefit that that convention center funding stream could offer. And so we are ready for those conversations and have had some internally already. And while there's not enough detail today, I do think it's worth exploring the model that's successfully managed the convention centers and see if it could expand to other municipal facilities, including the PAC. It has been a very successful model, and we think it could help with decreasing the need from the municipality from other funding sources to help support municipal-owned buildings. And there's also more intangible ways that we can help, from partnering on wayfinding now, creating a neighborhood guide, which actually was an idea from this room, to creating pride of place campaigns and workforce attraction campaigns that will help not just tourism, but everybody into the future. So we've submitted the written response to the very specific questions that were asked in advance of this work session. So today, I'm hopeful that we can understand better how you want to hear from us, and to ensure that you understand the value our businesses and the organization places on assembly participation. That's a shout out to Assemblymember Branga, who has been a very active participant, and we appreciate it and value it. I know that there'll be a reorganization as she leaves the assembly, but we really do value having a representative at our meeting. So we look forward to discovering the next board member for Visit Anchorage. And if time allows, the thing that we always love to do, but we put it to the back today because we know it's not your goal today, we would love to share some show and tell, show some of the programs that these bed taxes are going to from a promotions perspective, and also return on investment. But since the start of this contract, since 1975, investing in tourism marketing has paid off in multiples, and not just for travel and tourism companies, but for local tax revenues, and by extension, the quality of life in Anchorage. As it stands right now, in a single year, this shared revenue and the tourism industry reinvests in future tourism marketing, pumps more than $50 million into the general fund from tourism-related tax collections, also keeps two public assets, mentioned earlier, the Denina and the Egan, looking good and off the list of requests to address maintenance. This happens without the need to use local property taxes or create additional levies or make other state and local requests for capital improvements. And all with what I hope is a minimum administrative burden to the MOA based on the work that we provide. The needs are many and they seem to be growing, and we're eager to step up again and help the community find solutions and resources that can address more and get us to where we all want to be. All that said, we firmly believe in the value of our work to accomplish it. We firmly believe in the necessity of our work to remain competitive and maximize the benefit of visitation to our community. We believe we've earned the opportunity to continue this work as the sole tourism promotions contractor to the municipality, and that the 4% bed tax remains the appropriate level of investment. This is a tried and true mechanism that incentivizes mission-based decisions. And we have an updated contract with suggested changes in the KPIs and performance measures to share with the administration, and we'll welcome input as we move forward over the next several months to come to a mutually beneficial agreement. I know that was a lot. I appreciate your time and attention, and I know that you have questions for us. Thank you.
Ms. Salato might have a question for Mr. Falsey.
Hi, Mr. Falsey. So what I'm reading the AM, and I guess I just need you to set the stage a little bit before we dive into the detail here, which is we are looking at the additional amount due. Can you just tell me how we get to the additional amount due and what's the interplay between this three-way split and where we're at today?
Thank you for the question, members Alatel. The short version is, if I can make this short, that there is an interwoven nest of contracts that has been set up since 2005 when we constructed the Denina Convention Center. In the main, we think of the bed tax as divided into three. It is 12%, 4% goes to general government, 4% goes to the promotion of tourism, 4% goes to paying off the bonds that built the Denina Center. In the waterfall that relates to the way the 4% of bed taxes that go to the convention center are structured, there actually is a little piece that has been pulled off of the promotion of tourism that also goes to support the paying of the construction bonds. There was a piece of language in that agreement, section 4.2C, that said if there was an extraordinarily high amount of return, we would trigger something that would release that additional amount of funds from the 4% that promoted bed tax. And because of the way our agreements are set up, it falls back to Visit Anchorage. So I think the punchline to all of that is we believe that this AM is required by the contracts that we have now. We're in an extraordinary time where we got more bed tax into the convention center reserves than really anybody ever anticipated.
Okay. I think I get it. I appreciate it. Do we have a copy of the agreement or this section 4.2C language, or could you just send it out?
We certainly could do that.
I appreciate it.
It is
Thanks.
pretty inscrutable, so we'll maybe have to send it with a little bit of additional background. There is a PowerPoint presentation that I know that Public Finance Ross Griswold has given to folks many times that also not easygoing, but would probably be helpful. But we'll get that to the members.
All right. Thank you.
Anyone else with questions? Okay, so now then I think it would be great to walk us through the financials as you sit right now. So just for orientation of folks, this conversation is really for today, the question before us on the agenda, and also for the fall. The kind of punchline of this conversation is that this contract is up for kind of reissuance. It is at the end of its useful life. We've had a partnership with Visit Anchorage for a long time. The change in funding that we have seen through the bed tax necessitates us to look at the funding source and look at the highest and best use of those dollars and have a conversation internally and as a community about how this structure should be, because there's no reason the quote waterfall, that's an interesting term, the reserve waterfall that's in the original contract needs to be there, or it could be another structure in the future. And so in some ways, this reporting process will serve as a kind of a end of contract report for us and conversation so that when we come back to the conversation about what's the path forward, we are able to do it based on the information we got from the contractor and their performance, and then our own values with the administration on where we should be going in the future. And so that's kind of why. The why isn't really about this document. I think Mr. Falsey really made it plain that the answer to the appropriation that is before us is to appropriate it because we're bound by the contract. And so this is a conversation happening in several tracks. And so with that though, you have your controller here, maybe kind of a walkthrough on the status of the financial picture for us and how this works, because it's a pretty complicated looking document.
Absolutely. So as Mr. Falsey stated, we are 1/3 of 12%. So we see 4% of the revenue. By the time that it reached me and become a responsibility of me, we're talking about 1/3 of that 12. 8 is under sort of our jurisdiction as we handle that convention center responsibility. But the 4 that I deal with is the promotions 4, and that's what you see before you. If everybody got my giant spreadsheet as opposed to the single paper printout. Starting from left to right, we're looking at 2019 through 2023 annual aggregate actual costs and revenue. As we move into that colored gray block in the middle, we're looking at month by month breakout of our 2024 activities. 2024 is unaudited at this time. As we leave that gray block, we're looking at year-to-date spending into 2025 as of 3/12 when I pulled these reports. And then the blue box is our budget as proposed by Visit Anchorage staff, submitted to our board for approval, and then later the municipality, and is our current action plan for 2025. So as we start over in 2019 on the far left, I want to draw your attention to the top left hand. All these rows across the top, captured in green in 2024, is what we see as the tourism contribution, revenue contributions to the municipality as a whole. These are not Visit Anchorage's revenue. These do not belong to the waterfall as it's been named. They belong to what we see the community, and it's what the tourism industry is paying back into the community. You see hotel and motel tax in that top corner. This is your entire 12%. As is seen by the municipality before it is apportioned by the waterfall. Down you have the property taxes from hotels, high-rise properties, and low-rise properties. And then P&I, which is the penalties and interest that's supposed to be earned on the hotel and motel tax, and then the car rental tax. These are the things that we identified as very clearly from tourism. We could draw our steady line from tourism into the general fund. And so we tried to show what we are contributing in there. As in 2019, you can see it was 49 million. Down into 2020, we saw what happened in 2020. Everyone remembers. And then you can see it growing through 2024 and hopefully into 2025. There's any questions on that section, they are sort of separate sections, so I'd like to treat them as such.
Brawley.
Yeah, I'm not familiar. I think this is supposed to say high rise, low rise. I'm not familiar with what those two components are.
Absolutely. So that's the property tax as collected by the municipality over the last 5 years for parcel IDs 314 and 315. That is high-rise motels higher than 10 floors and high-rise motels lower than 10 floors. So this would be properties like the Captain Cook would be listed under 314, I believe, high-rise. And then you would see things like the Copper Whale Inn, which is a smaller local, less like nationalized high-rise building, which would be under 315. There's lots of things missing here. Short-term rentals aren't recognized by the property tax parcels. Anything that's not identifying itself as a high-rise hotel or motel would also not be in that value.
Thanks. Yeah, and I just want to caution going too far outside of bed tax and car rental tax, because we could also talk about marijuana tax, alcohol tax, like you said, all these other ones. So I want to make sure we're not like overstating or trying to go outside of this kind of core of this revenue source. Thanks.
No, absolutely. So 314 and 315 are specifically hotel and motel properties. Is that, sorry.
Yeah, so that raises, of course, the question then what's the difference between hotel motel tax versus high-rise hotel motel tax?
One of them is property taxes and flows directly to the general fund. The other is hotel tax, which is part of the 12% you pay if you stay in a hotel room. And that 12% is held by the waterfall.
The top one, and then the ones that are below are just the
Direct to the general fund.
property taxes.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. That's okay. Number of folks in the queue, Mr. Salt, and then I think I saw Martinez, and then Mr. Bowman.
Yeah, real quick. Thank you, Chair. You see the rise in revenue. Does that equate to a rise in tourists as well? Or is it just a
Yeah.
rise in cost?
No, absolutely. And Julie may be able to speak better to the breakout of what it is. What we see is a mix of rate, visitor revenue, how they're spending their money. We saw rental cars be sort of a high capacity. They reach the top of their line, and then more come in. But it's a really a mixture. And to be honest, outside of my scope, once we get into the general economic stuff, we're looking more at Julie. But it is. We have a couple different resources to be able to measure these things that some are proprietary, so you get really direct information from like the hotels, and so we can see like demand night over night, any given week, this week over last year, over the year before, going back several years. So we are able to draw out pretty good conclusions about what's causing that. Rate's huge right now, but we have seen a steady increase of visitors, especially the independent traveler.
Mr. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple questions for clarity. Where do short-term rentals live?
So we do collect, the city does collect bed tax from short-term rentals, Airbnb, VRBO, and then privately rented items less than 30 days. They just have no ability to tell us which is which. So if you see in the public numbers as represented by the municipality, what they break them up in is luxury, mid-rise, and then economy. We did see a jump when we entered the short-term rental market. We saw a jump in economy, I believe. So we think that that's where most of the short-term rentals are. But then we also bought into a supplemental research program that allows us to track that short-term rental a little bit more closely. But as the city currently manages it, and as we have access, it's really easy to hide your Airbnb property. And so it's not designed for you to be able to tell exactly what Airbnb and whatnot. We get an aggregate amount from them.
Right on. Thank you. Should expect some follow-ups on that point. You mentioned, just wanted to get a clearer picture. You mentioned the difference between what I think was the pandemic time and then like post-pandemic time and seeing it growth. Is that, you didn't mention COVID and mention the pandemic, but you mentioned a year. Is that what we were tracking there?
I think it depends. For revenue, we saw it hit in 2020, but we saw the drag last a little bit longer on certain things. But what we did see was a huge return of that independent traveler that next year. But and really not trying to step outside of my scope, but ask me about this bridge.
I guess to paint the broadest picture possible, you saw the decrease in 2020, and I don't think that bears any more explaining. What you saw in the years right after that, particularly 2022, but also a little bit in 2023, was not just a return to what we were getting prior to the pandemic, but this really incredible snapback of people who had been cooped up in their houses, had a bunch of saved up vacation time, possibly were sitting on some amount of savings, and simultaneously were in a headspace where they didn't know whether this was going to be their only opportunity to travel and they might have to go back to what they were doing previously during the pandemic, or if this was a bigger time and things were going to reopen and travel was going to return to normal. So I think if you look at those lines for 2022 and 2023 in particular, you're not seeing a normal amount of growth. You're seeing a really fantastic one-time shot of people just being ready to travel. And we've seen that kind of cool off in the intervening 2024 and to some degree this year, I think, as well.
Cool. And it just it alludes to this question that I have with respect to ROI, the rate of the return on our investment. It's similar in the way Member Brawley described, wouldn't go too far to kind of claim return on investments that are really, really broad out there, and trying to really stick within a lane. I know it's very difficult to identify the relationship of that, but fundamentally, there was no amount of money we were going to spend in 19 or 20 that was going to change the future of of travel, because we were in a global pandemic mode, right? And we didn't necessarily know it, but like in hindsight, probably wouldn't be something that you'd say, well, extra money we would have been able to overcome the pandemic. Or and conversely, would be fair to say you didn't have additional dollars to push the spike, right? And it was like the pent up thing that you described. These are things that are a little beyond one's control, one's organizational control, market level analysis. Is that generally fair, because we're trying to also find a balance between where we live in the marketplace and the right sizing of our investments.
Yeah, if I can start, and
Yeah.
it's like Jack's
you.
anxious to answer too. True, in 2020, people were afraid to fly, people were told to stay home. I mean, it was, you're right, no amount of marketing during that year. In fact, we had to really watch the timing of the market. Because it actually, you could have a backlash if you were marketing during that time. And so we did have some money from 2019, and we also got some state grants. We were able to do some research during that time to really understand what the next traveler was going to look like. We knew it was going to be a different travel environment for several years, so we were able to do that. And using that research, we were able to refresh our programs to speak to a different audience and to speak with different messaging, things about healthy Anchorage instead of, inspirational Anchorage. It was, we're doing the things right. We are also able to use that money to help our businesses in Anchorage serving visitors understand how they should talk to visitors too, and also best practices. So if you were a small tour operator who ran people up and down the highway in a van, there was a whole lot of new protocols that they needed to learn. If you're a hotelier, we've got a couple in the room. They really led the industry in figuring out how to manage visitation with tourists, but we tried to spread the word as well and be that kind of a resource. In that way, I do think that we could affect what the snapback looked like. The other thing we were able to do is continue sales efforts. We learned how to do everything online for a while. And of course, meetings and conventions are working on a multi-year timeline anyway. And so in 2021, while it still was maybe a little iffy to try to encourage people to get on a plane and travel right then, it certainly was feasible for us to be training meeting planners on Anchorage and saying, in 4 years, which is your normal planning cycle, let's hope that you can come on up, and here's all the reasons why Anchorage would be a good fit for your meeting. So we weren't dead in the water during those years, and I feel like we used that time and the limited resources. Obviously, 2020, our budget declined significantly. Our staff declined by 70% during that year. And so the staff remaining was super busy because the phones didn't stop ringing. But I do feel like we did a very good job managing the resources we had during that time, and that we did set the stage for future marketing.
Right on. Thank you, Chair. Come back.
May I add one thing to that? Thank you. I'd just add that while tourism snapped back for everybody after COVID, I do believe that we got better results faster, in part because of the investment that the Assembly and the administration made in making sure that we were ready the second people were ready to travel again. And so I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you for that, because it did make a difference. Those returns are big, and maybe they would have been big regardless, but I believe that they were bigger faster because of the investment that you made.
Mr. Vaughan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for being here. I know that the primary focus today is Visit Anchorage, but I think there's sort of a lot of layers of conversation swirling with all of this. First of all, I'll just say thank you for your interest in wanting to support the PAC. I think that is such an important community asset. And I'm looking forward to going to Hadestown on the 12th with the PAC. I think Member Brawley's going as well, maybe some others too. As that conversation continues, I just want to flag that I would be interested in working on that project. So for you guys, and then for Mr. Falsey as well. And then I think it's interesting to hear that we still don't know what proportionally is the short-term rentals. I know that some of that is contracted with the platforms, that we can't get into like a more granular level of detail, how much does Airbnb versus VRBO, et cetera. Some of that I think is, we brought this up with a prior administration, how can we have more insight into that? And the Assembly has done some legislation revolving around getting more data from those platforms. But I think it would be interesting to look at proportionally, is that growing, the proportion from short-term rentals? And so I guess another thing flagging for Mr. Falsey is, if it is, how can
is there potential as we look at the room tax, is there potential for capturing the increase in short-term rentals and putting that toward a housing trust fund? Can we use some room tax, because I think we hear often interest and concern and even complaints from our constituents about there's too many short-term rentals in Anchorage, and whether that's true or not, if that portion is going up, can we capture some of those revenues and use them for long-term housing? I think would be an interesting conversation. And then I guess the final thing that I'll flag is just kind of wanting to know the financial picture. We know that there's great need at the PAC, for instance, of deferred maintenance, but comparatively with Denina Center and the Egan Center, do they have a bunch of money, or are they good, or do they, what is the financial picture there? So that's, I guess, one question I have. Thanks.
So just really briefly, we only have very, very generalized data, but we do buy into a little bit of reporting from a company called Key Data, and they do provide some level of visibility into short-term rentals. Right now, on an annualized basis, short-term rentals could be as much as 15% of the room night available, the room night demand consumed in Anchorage. So the number of room nights stayed. Real big caveat with that is when you're talking about one hotel room, you can see what that is. When you're talking about one room or one house, we're not sure that it's a one-to-one. We may be talking about an entire property. Just know that that's a little bit difficult to quantify. In terms of revenue, it's actually a little bit less than that. I would say someplace in the neighborhood of, say, 12% of blended hotel and short-term rental revenue. That may be different if it shows up as property, or not property tax, but as bed taxes.
And then if I can go back to a couple of your other comments. You commented on the PAC, and one of the questions that was sent to us in advance was what is the line between tourism promotions and it's not tourism promotions? And I shared this story, I think, with Assemblymember Martinez, maybe someone else. But the PAC is a great example for us. We talked to them last fall, actually last summer. It was during our budgeting period. We need to get a budget to the city by October 1st. So September, August is when we really start budgeting. We had a conversation with Cody. She shared her concerns going into 2025. As everybody states and agrees, it's an important institution for us here in Anchorage. She asked about a sponsorship, a very large sponsorship for us, which was $100,000 as an outright sponsorship. We do have non-bed tax funds that we can use for those type of things, or that we do use for those type of things, but it wasn't large enough to support that request. But what we did is we went back to the PAC and said, look, can we turn this into a marketing opportunity, not just a flat out sponsorship? Can we get leads? You talk about the visitors that you sell tickets to. So every time you sell a ticket to an out of state or an out of Anchorage zip code, can we have access to that lead? Can you end that sale process with a link to our homepage saying, planning a trip to Anchorage? And so we figured out how to support them and turn what was what we would have considered a non-bed tax expense, which we do throughout the community, just not to that extent, that one large purchase, and turn it into a marketing expense. So we're trying to figure out how to spread the wealth to other organizations that we think are tourism facing. And so that was just one example. As you mentioned, the PAC, I didn't want to lose that opportunity.
And then for the third question, which was the value of the convention centers, I think the answer there is sort of with the municipality and with the waterfall. That 4% that, so I refer to them as the Civic 4, the Promo 4, and the General 4. And the General 4, I don't pay attention to all. I'm excited it exists, but it's not my issue. The Civic 4 comes down, it's held, and the waterfall for visual learners is a real waterfall, and that's why it's called that. But as that 4% trickles down, it's held in reserve for the convention centers per the bond that went to the voters, so that the convention centers are kept in good maintenance, good operations, so that they're provided for outside of just that initial construction, because we've seen buildings be built and not be able to maintain themselves. And so as that bond was produced for the convention centers, they built in a formula to support themselves as part of this waterfall. And so when the civic and convention centers need something, they're able to self-support through the waterfall. And so 4% of it that's dedicated, the Civic 4, as I refer to it, that Civic 4 comes down and is held in a fund that goes towards the debt service, which is about 7 million a year. It goes towards the debt service. It's split about halfway between principal and interest. And so that fund is required to hold the debt service +1. So it holds about $13 million in it. And then as you come down from there, there's another fund which deals with the operations of the convention centers. They're given what's called net operating loss allowance. So they operate within their revenue and their expenses. They operate within their budget that they have presented to us, to the municipality, to Renee. They operate within that, but they're allowed to lose up to $1.6 million. They don't aim for it, but they do. And then as part of that, they're required to put away 4% for CIP, which is a reserve for capital expense projects. And so as we see the convention centers run and operate, when they run better, they save more. And everything through this, we have provided the coverage. Well, tourism has provided the coverage for that bond. And it was all done originally to save the property taxes from ever having to shell out in service of the convention centers. And it has done that, and it has done that wonderfully. We do not know exactly how much is held in that fund because it's held by the municipality, but we think it's anywhere in the realm of 32 to 45 million.
So just to be clear, that amount outside of the need that has been used here to date might be $32 to $40 million sitting in the trust for those two buildings.
You have a question? Sorry.
Thank you. Mr. Falsey nodded yes. Okay, so I have more folks in the queue. Ms. Alto.
Thanks. So I'm dived in pretty deep to your spreadsheet here now that it's big and I can read it. A couple of questions. It looks like we have a pretty substantial increase in the media advertising line for 2025 to $6.2 million. And end of year last year was shy of $2 million. What are we getting for $6.2 million? So that's question number one.
Software conversion. We went through a software conversion in 2023. We reprocessed all of our chart of accounts and readdressed our needs basically as an organization. And are we still filling all those things? And what's here, what's there? As part of that, met with each department head. Communications was a big part of that. They're one of our biggest spending departments, as you can see from our budget. What we found was that originally, the rule had been any advertising placement that linked back to Anchorage.net was considered website marketing. And so what we used to have is a line called website marketing and development, which has now just been changed to website development. And this is to hide, or this is not hide, I'm so sorry, this is to make it more clear if and when we redesign our website, which we are intending to in the next year, expenses that are directly related to redesigning and marketing that website as opposed to just general placement. Originally, when the chart of councils existed, the website was its own item that we wanted to track as far as does this do this, does do this, but now everything links to the website. Every radio ad has a banner that links to the website. Every podcast ad has a banner. And so those have been moved up into media advertising, which we thought was a more accurate description.
But okay, well, and I see that last year you had website development at $2.6 million, but even still, that's a 3-time fold. So that's pretty substantial. I guess better be one heck of a website and really do something. Like, I just don't get it. And I don't get it because I see you report ultimately a $5.5 million loss. These things don't add up. This math doesn't math for me.
The math doesn't math. I understand that sentence. So you're right. We did budget for a $5 million loss this year, or expenses over revenue this year. I mentioned earlier that we did have a carryover from 2024. And in the written report, we talked about our reserves policy, how it shifted in 2023 from a 4-month policy to a 6-month policy. And we're working to spend that down. We ended 2024 with more reserves even above our policy. And so that additional 5 million over revenues this year is to get us back in line with our reserves policy. So that's why this budget is unusually high, because we had carryover that we put into 2025. I will say a portion of what you're looking at on that media line is a special project, and I'm sorry to just call it that. A special project. We did have conversations with a municipality. We are still under an NDA for that project, but it is part of that process. Um, Other than that, it's media placements. It's working with travel writers, it's working with journalists, and it's driving traffic not only to Visit Anchorage's website, but to the website of tourism businesses around the city. So it's all of our media placements, whether that's digital publication, whether it's a old-fashioned print publication. Believe it or not, we do still do a little bit of that, not a ton. Whether it's getting video on social platforms, however we can get new eyeballs to come check out Anchorage. That's what that media budget is really our marketing, our consumer budget.
Okay, well, it doesn't feel sustainable um, if you're reporting a $5 million loss. Where's your building purchase in here? Is it listed as a capital asset somewhere in your overall portfolio? I'm just not seeing it because I do know you recently purchased a building. I do see the depreciation, but I don't see the
Yeah, so
net.
no, so it wouldn't appear on our income statement. It does appear on our balance sheet and is being depreciated over a 39-year period. It was purchased in 2022. We inhabited after work in process we capitalized in 2023 and have been depreciating it since 2023. It's part of the reason you see reductions in our operations cost. We have a saving of depreciations over rent. And so we do see a little bit of a savings there, but that's really the only place our building will appear on our income statement. It does live on our balance sheet. Per contract, any asset purchased by Visit Anchorage reverts back to the municipality. So anything purchased by Visit Anchorage in excess of $5,000, we inventory tag and keep a list of.
Okay, thank you.
I have a number of folks still. Thank you, Ms. Brawley, and then Mr. Martinez.
Yeah, thanks. I think some of these questions suggest that we should really have a work session soon on the bed tax itself to understand, because some of the questions I think were really outside of your guys' organizational specifics, but I think that would be very useful. So that's just a request to put out there. I'm wondering, you spoke to the increased budget and how some of that was kind of a one-time because you're spending down funds. But in general, what I saw was that the delta between 2019 and 2024 was really an increase in promotion, which makes sense because you were describing that's what you would do. But I also saw some kind of increase in baseline, salaries, things like that. Maybe not so much operations. That line seems to be the same. So I'm just wondering, and I'll ask my second question, but they're related. Kind of how much would a reduction impact your baseline, versus the promotion, which is, it can move up and down obviously with funding. And then I'm asking that because in 2025, we had a good meeting yesterday. Among other things, we talked about some headwinds that we're already seeing, right? With Canadian visitors, with just, when folks feel like they do not have the extra money to come up here, what happens with that? And I know I'm not asking to project what that looks like, but I'm just wondering, should we be concerned that we're going to get significantly less money in 2025 based on what you're seeing? And because I'm trying to figure out kind of, is where we are the peak and it's going to go down, or is it going to sustain regardless of the efforts we make because of these outside forces? And then also just thinking about how resilient your organization would be, that if there is a significant reduction, hopefully not as much as 2020, but how would you manage that? Thanks.
Whew, that's a lot to think about. Thank you for the question. I guess maybe instead of looking at the spreadsheet, if you go to the written report that we provided in response to the questions set to us, the graphs might be a little bit easier to digest than that giant spreadsheet. And this outlines the top graph, personnel, operations, and promotions. So the yellow is promotions, and this actually leads into the second question you asked: how resilient are we? We have been very careful in building our staff back and in managing our operations costs just for that question. And you talk about 2025, is it sustainable? Our budget No, I talked about the carryover funds that we're spending in 2025, which really makes it a very large budget for even us. And so we are not anticipating that we'll be in the $19 million range that you see for 2025. I'm anticipating that we'll be into the 13-14 million dollar range. And so that is a reflection of what I'm anticipating for the entire bed tax, our third, the municipality's third, the convention center's third. You mentioned headwinds. Certainly headwinds we're facing, whether it's federal policy, whether it's meetings that previously relied on federal grants or federal employee attendance, or just nervousness in the economy right now. Also international, you mentioned Canada, we talked about that. So those are the headwinds that we see right now. We do also, I anticipate, and I'm looking to the audience right now, I don't anticipate that the rates that we've seen the last couple of years will be maintained in this kind of economy that we're facing, but I don't know that. I've been wrong before when I've anticipated changes in the rates that our hotels are able to charge and do charge. So I don't know that that answered anything, but I do anticipate for the overall bed tax to be pretty flat. For our budget, that would represent a decrease because we won't have the advantage of a carryover.
Thanks. Yeah, and I'll just briefly comment. I think as we think about one of the stories of the Denina and kind of that was that I think it was said that we're doing better than anybody thought we would. And so it was designed around the idea that it would only break even and we have to really hold on to any extra money. So it's just something to think about, that we're in a different situation, but we also should not be planning for the most robust, optimistic, rosy version, because sales taxes are just very variable, right? So just to put that out there for everybody to think about going forward. Thanks.
Okay, so I have Mr. Martinez, then Mr. Sol.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to pivot just a little bit into kind of the focus of Visit Anchorage and kind of trends, and particularly I wanted to focus on the role of cultural tourism and how do you all see it, and just kind of give me a quick response to that. I know I've seen in the report just identified some event support around Alaska Native events, but where does cultural tourism live within Visit Anchorage's purview at this point?
I think maybe starting at the highest level possible and zooming into Anchorage from there, we see a huge amount of demand for the local, whether that be local food, local people, locally based businesses. All of those things are becoming increasingly important to travelers everywhere. And I think Anchorage is really poised to take advantage of that because we are a fairly small, fairly well knit together place with a fair amount of authenticity, for lack of a better word. Where do I see that fitting in our role? We attend about 30 community events per year, either as sponsors or as booth participants. We welcome travelers and residents alike into the log cabin during an event called Local Conversations we host throughout the summer. And so this is really one of a very small opportunity in our visitor center to make those connections culturally. Obviously, when it comes to attractions like the Alaska Native Heritage Center, the Anchorage Museum, but also smaller community events, Juneteenth, the Pena Park Market, all of those things make the pitch to our potential traveler stronger. I could go on and on, but that's kind of the long and the short.
No, I'd rather continue the discussion. So thank you. And I appreciate you mentioning. So first I would just frame that I think it is an interesting conversation for us to continue in the long term with respect to what culture and cultural tourism means and the definitions of those particular things. And I do appreciate the local culture and things in that vantage point. And I also appreciate that you mentioned the Alaska Native Heritage Center. First, full disclosure, Member Braga knows this is one of our jewels of the East Side. So we appreciate the opportunity for that institution to be connected to our district and the importance of it. But Chair, I just wanted to flag while I think it's commendable to speak through the lens of those, the large Visit Anchorage and identifying those different institutions. Chair, I just recall that we have a grant with the Native Heritage Center to develop a cultural tourism task force. And so I'm interested in where that work lives with respect to today. Like, I would love to hear from the folks who are doing that work germanely, rather than hear from you all directly. Just fundamentally, you're not, I don't think, tasked with developing a cultural tourism task force that I think we tasked the Native Heritage Center to do. So I'm interested in, is there room to hear that at all? Is that a different conversation, or how can we hear a little bit more about the visit experience and the way potentially the cultural tourism fits into this conversation, Chair?
One way is if we have any representatives of those organizations in the room or on the phone, we could briefly hear from them. And also, I'm not remembering that grant, so maybe I can be reminded of that. But if we did, maybe it was during the COVID times. Yeah, and so we might want to run down.
Yeah, I think it was in response to that time, Chair. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we might want to run it down.
Yeah, I think it was ARPA dollars that were associated with that.
Chair, I do know that we have a representative from the Alaska Native Heritage Center on the phone. If we want to give
That
them a
would be
few
great.
minutes to just address that. Thanks.
Okay,
I would
so
love to hear
Mr.
from him.
Martinez has requested to hear from a representative from the Native Heritage Center. Who is on the phone?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Who is this?
This is Emily Edenshaw with the Alaska Native Heritage Center.
Hi there, Emily. Go ahead.
Hello, I'm getting a little bit of an echo, so I apologize.
Hold on, Emily. For everyone who has their mic on, let's make sure they're all turned off. Go ahead, Emily.
Yeah, thank you. I've been listening in. Hello to Julie and her team. And I just want to start off by saying thank you to the Assembly and for your leadership and service. I appreciate the opportunity to provide very brief comments. Before I speak to the question about the Cultural Tourism Task Force, which is actually a current grant, we were able to get $25,000 from the administration to be able to form a task force. Before I respond to kind of the inner workings of that, I really want to inform our Assembly, and if we follow the dollars, understanding that Alaska Natives make up about 15% of our population here. Our Alaska Native corporations pay into our taxes, which then support our general fund, which then support institutions like Visit Anchorage and many others. And so I really want to just draw our attention to the role of cultural tourism. We know that there is an economic research and studies that show when people experience it, they stay longer and they spend more money. And I am so happy to hear that Visit Anchorage has held this long-standing relationship. I will say, and to the prior question, our visitors across, whether if they're coming to us, flying in as an independent traveler, or they're coming to us via a cruise ship, they are all wanting more authentic experiences. And one of the things we've been really working hard to do through the Cultural Tourism Task Force is creating more product. I love the conversation and the funding conversation around marketing, but what we're seeing also at the state, and I know Julie serves on the state tourism, people.
Ms. Edenshaw, you're breaking up, so you might need to
Cultural
start.
Tourism Task Force
Emily, you're
is
breaking
because,
up.
can you hear me?
Yeah, so I don't know what's
Can you hear
happening.
me?
You were breaking up, and so I'm hoping you'll start over from just maybe like 30 seconds ago. And I don't know if you're on a speakerphone or what, but for sure you were breaking up. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. Is this better?
Seems like it.
Okay, sorry about that. Basically, what I said is cultural tourism, we know that there are research that shows that when people experience it, they stay longer and they spend more money. And I'm happy to provide that information to the Assembly. I will say that the Heritage Center has a long-standing relationship with Visit Anchorage. I will say that the industry is transforming in Alaska. And, we have visitors who come to our state not only to see the geographic beauty of our state, but also because they want to learn about the history, not only Alaska Native history, but also what went into creating the railroad. And not only, it's not just about Alaska Native history. There are so many other diverse cultures in Anchorage. And so to the prior question, I think for us, at the Heritage Center, we're leading this cultural tourism task force. There is a representative from Visit Anchorage on that task force. But one of the things I really wanted to draw the Assembly's attention to when we start having these conversations about taxes is, how can we create more access to these funds. There's been this longstanding relationship, and I am a huge proponent of continuing to support and fund Visit Anchorage. But as I shared earlier, Alaska Native corporations and other businesses do pay into the fund. And the way that it's currently set up right now is there is no dedication for cultural tourism. We need more product development. And that's one of the biggest things, as I've shared with others in other spaces, and I'll wrap up my comments. The amount of money that Visit Anchorage and others, and even ATIA and others, the millions of dollars that, and the hard work that they're doing to bring people to our state, I lift them up. But the reality is that the businesses that are predominantly benefiting from that investment are businesses that are currently established. And I will very strongly recommend to the Assembly, as we're having the fullest conversation as possible with taxes, we really need to be looking at how can we bring on more products so we can keep people in Anchorage. One of the things I want to draw your attention to is next summer, Royal Caribbean is going to be bringing ships to Seward, and one ship is going to have 4,500 people. What is going to happen? Are they going to come to Anchorage, or are they going to pass through and go straight to Denali? And so I think we really need to be having these conversations now. I do support the work and the strong partnership with Visit Anchorage, but I really am going to encourage our Assembly and our elected leaders to look at how we've structured access to these revenues, especially when it's our own community that's paying into that fund. So thank you for allowing me to speak. I know I have two other representatives in the audience, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
We're really running out of time, so I think that's good. I want to let Visit Anchorage finish with just any final comments that we want to put out there. Recognizing that this item of appropriation is before us, it's contractually obligated, so there's not a lot of room for discretion on the question that's before us at the short term. So, but go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I'd just add, inspired by Emily's comments, I've got the official guide to the official guide to Anchorage, pages 25 and 26, particularly Our People and Our Story, I think might be a nice introduction. Also our blog content. I'm also really pleased that we'll be partnering with the Alaska Native Heritage Center to do some Indigenous awareness training during our Alaska Travel Expo in May. So just in the spirit of keeping this short, we also have an introductory program for small businesses. Shane from Blueberry Tours was actually one of our first inductees. So we're definitely sensitive to the idea of fostering a bigger and broader base for cultural tourism in Anchorage.
And I know we're at time. Thank you for your time today. Please know that our doors are always open. In fact, we're not just willing, we're anxious and eager to talk to each of you. So thank you for your time. It'll be an interesting many conversations ahead of us, but I think that there's opportunity here. So thank you.
I'll note that we are going to hold a Rules Committee session sometime, I think in May, in which we invite all the various entities that are interested in having Assembly members participate on their boards in ex officio capacity or whatever, to do kind of a speed dating, if you will, to see if you can generate interest among the members to participate in your thing, because there are more opportunities than there are members. And so we don't direct or command anyone does anything. Each member is sovereign and gets to choose their own adventure. And so, but I will make assignments for those who are interested. With that, then we'll go ahead and adjourn. We're back here at 2:10 for what's going to probably be an interesting work session. So thank you, everybody. Yeah.
What did you choose?
I have